My name is Erica Spinelli, and this is my testimony. Sometimes it feels like it happened yesterday. Other times it feels like it happened 100 years ago. It used to be so hard to even think about 9/11. Remembering always felt like I was being dragged through a room full of demons and I would not be left alone until I faced it. One day, I said to myself, I can't avoid this forever. Funny how the nightmares always started back up around this time. It's okay to remember. I know this now. It was a morning like all others, or so I thought. I woke up at 4 a.m. to get ready for work. I'd been staying with my mother for a while and was almost 9 months pregnant. We both worked in New York City. We would always catch the 5 a.m. PATH train to the World Trade Center station where we worked. Borders, Books, and Music at number 5 World Trade Center. It was an L-shaped building located in the northeast corner. At the time, we were the largest Borders bookstore in New York City. We had a beautiful store, extremely large, a bookworm's dream world. Amazing high-glass windows that overlooked New York City in all its perfect splendor. I loved my job and I loved the people I work with. I'd just gotten my green card not too long before and was so excited about becoming a citizen. My mother and I arrived at work and went straight to the cafeteria after punching in. We were the queen baristas at Borders. I had worked every day of my pregnancy without missing a single day other than the scheduled prenatal visits. I always thought it was such a great feeling being at the cafe so early in the morning with my mother. The smell of all the different coffee flavors brewing, the delicious fragrance of hot cinnamon rolls and freshly baked chocolate chip cookies that made the air smell so sweet. Everyone loved our cafe, and Mom and I, we made a great team. On this particular day, I wasn't in a very good mood. I'd had nightmares all night long. I'm not sure why. My mother was used to my moods and avoided much conversation with me that morning. So we set up the cafe in silence until the doors opened at 7 a.m. and the clientele began to pour in. I was mechanically cutting up the pound cake as I'd done so many times before when I heard my mom calling out my name to come out there and help with the line. I went out to help her for the next hour or so. This place was busy, but of course, it was the World Trade Center. Suddenly, a loud crashing noise broke. It seemed to tremble the world. Some of the women gasped. Everyone froze. Registers went silent. Voices died. People stopped walking. A woman screamed. I think it's a bomb, she said. I looked at her, not really believing what I had just heard. I thought all New Yorkers were paranoid at the time. However, I noticed that some of the other customers had also begun to chime in on the bomb idea. My mouth hung open in disbelief. I just couldn't believe it. I looked around at everyone, fear in everyone's faces. They all ran to the giant floor-to-floor glass windows for a glimpse of what had caused the global tremor. The first thought that crossed my mind was that maybe a giant truck had perhaps lost its balance and struck against the pole or a building. After all, New York was notorious for traffic accidents. But the crash had been extremely loud and seemed to echo off of every corner. I walked closer to the window and looked down at New York. People were running to the left towards us and pointing up in horror. It reminded me of a scene from King Kong, the scene where the thing stomps across New York as horrified bystanders point up at him, screaming at the top of their lungs. Yes, people were screaming, and sirens were going off. A massive traffic jam was quickly forming. I looked up to my right to see what they were pointing at. From my angle at the window, I was unable to see much. Then a man shouted, "Oh my God, the building's been hit." My mouth hung open. I still did not register the possibility of that. I calmly asked him to please sit down before he caused a commotion, but he ignored me and repeated it. "We've been hit. We've been hit." He said this numerous times while pointing at something outside of the window. I refused to overreact just yet. This is when I spotted our service manager for the hour, calmly walking towards us. I asked him if he knew what was going on. He shrugged nonchalantly. "I don't know," he said. "Could be a bomb." I did a double take. I thought, don't they know that these kinds of things, they don't happen to me? They happen to other people maybe, or maybe on TV, but not to me. At that moment, I officially started to panic. My mother took hold of my hand and said, "We need to exit this building." A bearded man raised his fist up in the air and began ranting against Iraq in an accusing way. His voice echoed in my brain until I felt sick. I screamed back at him, begging him to stop, but he didn't hear me. I could see him disappear as he got swallowed up by the moving crowd, his fist still beating up into the air as he continued his raging rant against the alleged perpetrators. I don't know what I was feeling at that moment. I was confused and afraid. 1,000 emotions ran through me. I hadn't allowed myself to think of it until then, that this might actually be a terrorist attack. Only then did it begin to dawn on me. No, this wasn't complicated. We were positively, without a doubt, being attacked. I could suddenly hear my own breathing as if it were the only sound on the planet. My heart was beating so fast that it felt like it would explode right through my chest. My eyes suddenly caught my mother. They were now glued to her. She looked terrified. But in her efforts to find me, she was instead walking away from me. I knew I should follow her, but I couldn't move. I tried to call out to her, but I choked instead. I needed to move, but I couldn't find my legs. For a wild moment, it felt like I had absolutely lost my mind. But within moments, I snapped out of it. Slowly, I floated through the crowd. I followed my mother, who was quickly inching further and further away, calling my name. Soon, I was running as fast as I could and practically tackled her. She whipped around with bulging eyes and clutched my arm. And we ran. Office documents poured all around our heads, flying through the air like giant snowflakes. I don't know why, but this made my soul nauseous beyond belief. We kept running. My belly suddenly felt like it weighed 200 pounds. I was beyond exhausted. I was now breathing heavily and trying to catch my breath when I looked back up at the carnage that progressed. Cold chills ran down my back again. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, people were going to die. People were dying. People were dead. The notion practically ripped my heart straight through my chest. The nightmarish scene before me was undoubtedly the worst kind of hell I could have ever imagined. From this distance, I had a better view of the building's windows. A tie. I will never forget that tie. That tie, zigzagging in the wind as a man's body fell and broke on the concrete. I can't begin to describe. As we ran below, up ahead they jumped. Jumped for their lives, for their sanity. There was a woman in a blue suit. She too had jumped. And then another tie followed. It must have been unbearably hot in there for them to want to find relief in diving out of the windows to escape the flames. They were being burned alive. I suddenly heard hysterical screaming. It was an animal sound unlike I had ever heard before. After a moment, I was shocked to discover that the horrifying screams were coming from me. How could I process this? People were jumping out of windows. I had never seen anyone die before. My hand found my belly, and I closed my eyes. I dropped down to my knees, and I whispered, "God, do something, please." For 2 years after the event, my life was just basically a series of nightmares. I just felt really lost. That day left me scared of literally everything. I was paranoid all the time, jumpy, on edge, everywhere I turned, and I was just scared. Fear was definitely controlling my life at that time. It's almost like I can't even describe just what a bad place I was in. Every waking moment was torture for me because the events kept replaying over and over again in my head. I was just in a bad place and I didn't really know who to turn to. I was young, unsaved, a new mother, inexperienced. But even though I didn't know much about Christ at that time, I felt deep down that there was like a driving force. There was this strength that kept pulling me up every time I didn't think I could get back up. And I know that Jesus has always been there. He's always been there, and I didn't realize it at the time. I'm just so grateful. There are no words to describe just how deeply thankful I am for everything that He's done in my life. Accepting Christ as my Lord and Savior, it definitely changed my life in that I'm just not the same. And reflecting back on this experience, I clearly see that He's just given me so much, and He keeps on giving every day. That's how deep His love is. He saved my life and the life of my unborn child, my beautiful baby. I owe everything I have to Him. And I can't stress enough how grateful I am. I just don't take anything for granted anymore. He's just given me so much hope. And there's just so much to live for. Just trusting in His promises with all my heart, that's enough to put my spirit at ease. And I know that with Jesus by my side, I can face anything.